Hi, everyone, and welcome to our webinar. Today's webinar is intended to introduce you to furniture procurement. You will be earning 1.5 CLPs, and our goal today is to provide you with resources and information to help you with your specific furniture requirements. So before we get started, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, all attendees are muted to prevent distractions and interruptions during the meeting. We do have close to 400 registered today. However, I do encourage you to please type questions and comments in the Q&A box throughout the meeting. Closed captioning has been enabled in Zoom. To view the captions on your screen as subtitles, all you have to do is click the live transcript or CC button on your Zoom control bar. Closed captioning for this event is also being streamed live. Jim will be chatting you all that link in a moment if he hasn't done so already. You should already have been notified by Zoom that this meeting is being recorded. So within 10 days after today, we will be sending you a follow-up email that will include a few things. You will get a link to the recording, which we will be posting on our GSA YouTube channel, a Q&A document. If we can't get to all your questions today, we will get those answers to you in that email. A copy of the slides with all of the active hyperlinks to the tools and resources we're going to talk about. Jim will also post this file in the chat window. Hopefully, if you have a Zoom client that'll allow you, you can actually download it today as well. And last but not least, you will receive your CLP certificate. If you're attending this with a coworker or you didn't register or log in with your own email address, we won't know where to send your certificate. So take note of the email address on the screen, furniture@gsa.gov. This is how you can request your certificate if you do not receive it. We hope to get them out sooner than 10 days, but I just ask that you please give us at least 10 days to get the video and the certificates processed. Okay, so let's get started. Today's webinar is being hosted by GSA's Integrated Workplace Acquisition Center, and we would not be a federal employees if we didn't use acronyms. So you will hear us refer to ourselves pretty often probably as IWAC. IWAC is part of GSA's Federal Acquisition Service, or FAS or FAS. My name is Ivana Henry, and I'm the Business Management Director for IWAC. I'm going to be providing you an overview of who we are and what we offer. I'm then going to turn it over to Jim Boyle, who's going to walk you through some of the top things you need to know when managing a furniture project. And then at the end of the presentation, you're going to get to meet a panel of our subject matter experts from both our furniture projects team, John Breen, Laura Taddy, and Annette Lang. And then Sean Kelly, who is our MAS branch chief. They have all graciously volunteered to answer as many of your specific furniture project questions as we have time for today. And we have allotted a good amount of time for questions. So please don't be shy and type your questions as we go along in the Q&A. So about us, we're one of many acquisition centers and programs in GSA FAS. Our center specifically supports worldwide requirements for furniture and furnishings, but we also support requirements for office management products and equipment like multifunctional devices and office management service such as records management, document scanning and destruction services, just to name a few. But of course, in terms of today's focus, it is the furniture purchasing options and tips that we're going to cover. So as with other types of products and services, per FAR Part 8, you will first consider any required sources of supply, including excess furniture that your agency or other agencies may have and no longer need, Unicore, NIB, and Source America. You should also check with your internal agency policy about any existing blanket purchase agreements or other type of contract vehicle that may have already been established for your agency that you can use, or you may even be mandated to use to purchase furniture at your agency. But once a determination has been made that there's no other mandatory sources or existing agency-wide contract vehicles that can meet your specific furniture requirement, there are still a few GSA programs that you can take advantage of to streamline your furniture procurement. And that's what I'll talk a little bit about today. So we have a few of these. So we have the NSN program, where we manage close to 3,000 furniture products that are offered through GSA Global Supply. And then hopefully by now the news is out. The GSA's 26 different federal supply schedules were consolidated into one multiple award schedule, or MAS program. IWAC primarily manages two large categories under the MAS schedule, and that is office management in addition to furniture and furnishings. We also have an assisted acquisition team that specializes in conducting large furniture projects or acquisitions on behalf of other agencies. And again, we have experts here today from this team. They're going to be answering your specific project questions at the end. And so we have allotted, I think, about 30 minutes actually for questions. So be sure to type any questions you may have. Okay, so for less complex furniture needs, GSA Global Supply or the NSM program might be a good option. While not mandatory, it is a preferred source after Access, Unicore, and Ability One. We have over 1 million products in the NSM program that are identified by these 13-digit government part numbers called NSNs. 3,000 of these NSNs are specifically furniture and furnishing NSNs that we manage here in our center. We have already procured these NSNs so that they can be easily requisitioned by you from GSA. A requisition, if you're not familiar, is an agency-to-agency transfer. This means that no contract or acquisition is needed. You simply place your order for the NSN using a purchase card or activity address code or DODAC. Furthermore, if category management goals are important to your agency, GSA's NSM program was recently designated a best-in-class or BIC solution by OMB, so you can actually achieve a greater BIC spend by using this program. So to learn more about this option, you can visit gsa.gov Furniture NSN. We have full color brochures of all the different furniture NSNs by product line that are available. There are probably close to 20 product lines right now, but I do have some images on the next few slides just to give you a flavor of what's actually available. So these are some of our most popular NSNs that are available, as the title says, to help your agency or employees work anywhere safely and efficiently. Something I didn't mention directly is that when you order NSNs from GSA Global Supply, we've already ensured compliance with the FAR, including the Ability One mandates. So for example, the sit to stand desktop workstation, the backrest and the footrest that are pictured here, those are on the Ability One procurement list. So we have already procured them from NIB, or National Industries for the Blind, as they are the designated mandatory source for those items. Okay. Next slide. So we recently also established a healthcare furniture product line, approximately 200 NSNs for a variety of patient rooms and medical facility waiting rooms. And then we still see some private offices out there. So pictured here are NSN items from the traditional executive wood furniture line. And there's way too many to show, but hopefully this gives you just a flavor of what's available. Okay, so while we're constantly expanding the furniture products that we offer through the NSN program, it is still limited. So if the NSN program doesn't meet your need, the GSA MAS program, also known as Federal Supply Schedules, is the next option that we recommend. In IWAC, we manage, as I said, the following subcategories of products and services under the mass larger furniture and furnishings category. Under each of these subcategories, you have an access to a list of vendors who've been awarded GSA schedule contracts for that category of product. So for example, under the Office Furniture 33721, if you go onto our Schedule E library, you would see a list of contractors that have already been compliant with the basic federal regulations and policies, for example, TAA compliance. And in the case of furniture, they also have to meet or exceed the applicable ANSI and BIFMA standards for safety and durability. The base schedule pricing has already been established as fair and reasonable and better than the pricing that they give to their most favored commercial customer. However, depending on like the order value, you're actually you're actually encouraged, and in some cases, depending on the dollar value, you're actually required to request deeper discounts, especially when ordering quantity. Purchasing off the schedule saves you time because you're also following the streamlined ordering procedures found in FAR subpart 8.4. So the subcategories that I've highlighted with the red star here are the most frequently used. The office furniture subcategory, also referred to as special item number or SIN 33721, is where you'll find all of the contractors that offer the furniture products that would be used in a typical office. So things like case goods for private offices, desks, systems furniture, filing, storage, seating, tables, collaborative furniture, and other miscellaneous type furniture and accessories. The other SIN that I wanted to highlight is 541614CF, which is the Comprehensive Furniture Management Services subcategory. This is where you would find contractors who provide furniture-related services like design and layout services, project management services, etc. So some of the agencies, like we do at GSA, have design services available internally, or if you are in a GSA PBS owned or leased space, PBS will often handle the design for your agency. However, if you don't have access to design services, you can purchase design services and others here using the streamlined MAS procedures. The last one I'm going to touch on is actually a group of 4 SINs that comprise what we call the MAS Packaged Furniture Program. So if you're one who is familiar with the MAS program and you're staying abreast of all the MAS program changes recently, you may have heard that there were revisions to the solicitation for the package SINs that occurred at the end of March. These MAS contractual changes should really be seamless to you as the buyer. Basically, the packaged furniture program will now utilize contractor teaming arrangements or CTAs that have already been established at the schedule level, instead of utilizing letters of supplies from the other manufacturers and dealers on schedule under one of the other subcategories. There is a 180-day transition period for the vendors to switch over, so you might be presented with letters of supply and CTAs in the quotes and proposals that you receive. Both are completely acceptable, but you can and should definitely expect the package vendor to still act as the integrator for you, bringing together all the products and services you need for a total solution. So because we had such a broad audience, I don't want to get too deep into CTAs, but I want to at least define it for those not familiar. A CTA is where 2 or more GSA schedule contractors would team together to provide a total solution to your specific furniture requirement, usually a more complex requirement. This is where they otherwise wouldn't have been able to quote on the requirement or offer you a total solution. For example, maybe you're outfitting a space where you need dormitory and quarters furniture, but you want to also include AV equipment and some specialized tables and seating for a lounge, and maybe even need appliances. Without CTAs, you'd probably have to award at least 3 different contracts because it's not likely that one vendor is going to offer all that. And at a minimum, you're probably going to limit competition. You don't have to use the package subcategory to allow CTAs under the MAS program. But posting the requirement under the package SIN where you already have the pre-established CTAs and vendor relationships can really reduce your acquisition time and help you meet your competition requirements with a single contract award. If you take a look at the vendors under the packaged office SIN, another benefit is that 90% of them happen to be small businesses. Jim is going to talk about a little bit about the SBA non-manufacturer rule, which can make set-asides for furniture difficult in some cases. But if you post your requirement to this specific vendor pool under the packaged program, your odds are pretty good that you're going to end up awarding to a small business, which means even though you didn't set aside the requirement, you might still end up with orders supporting and counting towards your small business goals. So if you do want to know more about the solicitation changes for packaged, you can type your questions in the Q&A. We have Sean Kelly here who can answer them for you. You can also go to the link that I have provided on this slide to see the detailed changes that are posted online. And then if you have any other concerns or questions, maybe later, you can email us at furniture@gsa.gov and we'll set up a call with Sean's team. Okay, so NSN program, MAS program, we covered those. Those are what we call our self-service options. But what if you need additional contracting support? So you can turn to our furniture projects team for a turnkey solution or for advisory services. So IWAC's assisted acquisition services offered through our projects team span the complete furniture procurement process, from developing your acquisition strategy to delivery and task orders, and even accounts payable services. The projects team basically conducts the entire acquisition on your behalf. They can establish a blanket purchase agreement or BPA to support all of your agency furniture needs. There is a fee that applies though to this service. So the projects are accepted on a case-by-case basis, basically when it's in the best interest of both parties to do so. This team again is here to answer questions today, but they're also available to you at any time to provide advising services to you, and those are at no cost. This could be for any type of furniture requirement, whether you're looking to put a BPA to support all of your agency's furniture needs, or you just have a smaller one-time project that you need to accomplish and you need some assistance. These advising services that we call them can be, as simple as borrowing a sample statement of work from us, or actually getting some detailed feedback on your requirements document and acquisition strategy. Okay, so if your agency is in PBS, leased or owned space, PBS may also be able to support your furniture needs. IWAC's assisted acquisition team that I just spoke about has already established some BPAs on behalf of PBS in multiple locations, which makes it much easier and quicker for them to buy the furniture on your agency's behalf. Our projects team is also currently working on awarding a new national BPA for PBS, which will allow GSA to support more agencies with full service solutions for the smaller projects as well. And then the last program I wanted to touch on is the FIT program, which is really focusing on transforming the government's real estate footprint. It looks to improve an agency's space utilization while also improving collaboration and productivity, in turn reducing energy and carbon use. At the core, the FIT program is a leasing action that allows agencies to lease furniture during a 5-year term and lease IT that might be needed during a 3-year term. This is done so to ease the cost burden while giving agencies the furniture and technology they need to be more productive in an efficient, smaller footprint. So this program is actually run outside of our acquisition center, even though we do the procurement. So to request consideration for the program, you can email this address I've provided here, totalworkplace@gsa.gov, or click on that link and you could learn all about it. Okay, and this is the last slide I have with some additional resources. So in terms of e-tools, we have GSA e-library. This is a market research tool where you will go to access all of the awarded contractors under each of the furniture subcategories or SINs. You'll be able to click on each contractor and view their contract information, including their terms and conditions, their price list, social economic indicators, and more. GSA Advantage and GSA Global Supply are both online shopping and order link sites. GSA Global Supply only has products that can be requisitioned from GSA. So if you're not looking to do an acquisition and you want to stay in the lane of requisitioning those NSNs, GSA Global Supply is the easiest place to go. But if you're used to using Advantage, you can also go to Advantage, which includes both the NSN items available through Global Supply and items available from the multiple award schedule contractors. You'll see the difference because the contractor for the NSNs will be listed as GSA Global Supply versus the actual vendor who will be listed for all the schedule items. And then GSA eBuy is our online request for quote system. When you do a schedule buy under FAR 8.4, you can, but you don't need to post the requirement at sam.gov. Only GSA schedule vendors with contracts awarded for the specific SINs or subcategories that you select in eBuy will be able to see your requirement. So this is often a preferred way to do your schedule buy. And then we also have another complimentary service called Market Research as a Service, or MRAS. This is where GSA will actually create and post an RFI on eBuy on your behalf. And we provide you with a consolidated report in results in one report with some really nice visuals. So that can take away some of the burden from you. And then lastly, I have a link here where you can find some of the sample documents that we've posted online. You'll see a sample statement of works. We have a guide and a sample statement of work for design services and a host of other buying guidance. And then for training and help with any of the tools and resources, you can also find your local CSD online at the next link if you don't know who that is. We have customer service directors that are geographically located around the world to provide direct training and support to you. And again, our easy to remember email address, furniture@gsa.gov. Keep that in mind. You could always reach us. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Savannah. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Boyle, and I'm a business management specialist here for IWAC. I'm here this afternoon to give you a high-level overview of the furniture procurement process, with a focus on some tips and guidance our center has learned over the years from buying furniture. Just a little background on myself. Before moving into my current role in business development, I spent 12 years as a CEO buying many of the products and services we're going to cover today. And also, just for fun, I kept my warrant. I didn't want all those contracting classes to go to waste. Next slide, please. First, before we get into how to buy the furniture, it's important to have an understanding of the office furniture market. Product parts are neither standardized nor compatible. Vendors do not offer complete workstations with unit pricing. Rather, they develop product lines that can be configured in many ways to accommodate different spaces and different types of work. This is particularly true for paneled systems and case goods. It may be difficult to discern if a vendor has the specific product just by looking at their published price list. This is where Control F becomes your best friend when looking through a vendor's catalog. Whether design services come internally or externally, interior design is necessary for any furniture project. The role of the interior designer is to develop appropriate configurations and products for the space available. These configurations are often referred to as typicals. Note that in the commercial world, this process is often very different. Vendors do a lot of no-cost design work in the interest of winning the business. This process shapes the requirement and doesn't lead to competition for a discrete bona fide need that the federal government requires. So as you know, this is not true for the federal government procurement process. We can't just receive design service for free. So the designers will ensure your specifications are generic enough so more than multiple vendors can bid, and the requirements will satisfy your agency's needs. Often for PBS space, PBS can provide designers for a furniture project. Otherwise, the design services can be done internally by your own agency if you have the resources, or there are design service vendors available on schedule. You would issue a single award to a design service schedule vendor, and they can provide design, project management, and technical evaluation services for your procurement. It's a useful tool if you don't have the resources at hand. Next slide, please. It's important to develop an understanding of what's available. In the industry, there are a handful of large manufacturers who can dominate the market for the most part. For your procurement, rather than listing the manufacturer's specific requirements, you will need to identify sets of functional, acceptable alternatives that span across all the major manufacturers and small ones as well. The manufacturers have a broad network of dealers who can support furniture projects throughout the country. Additionally, most of the projects are manufactured in the United States, and the dealers are very familiar with the manufacturer's products they work with. The non-manufacturer rule will apply due to the existence of small manufacturers. Class waivers are limited and would not be suitable for workstations and other key components of an office setting. And we'll discuss that a little bit more later on. Next slide, please. A request for information, or RFI, often through GSA eBuy, is a useful tool for customers to survey the vendor community to determine if the requirements are applicable to the furniture SINs they are soliciting under, and if there's ample competition for the requirements. You can gauge vendor interest in your upcoming furniture procurement, but it is important to know that even if a vendor does not respond to your RFI, it doesn't mean they're not interested in bidding on the upcoming RFQ. I guess they're just playing a little hard to get there. Vendors will respond to an RFI to express interest in the opportunity, but they are unlikely to provide comments about the requirement in a formal setting. For comments about the requirements or the RFQ, conversations with vendors are much more effective, like one-to-one. But also you have the option of going on showroom tours. Showroom tours are a useful tool to gain a better understanding of a vendor's product offering. If you were asked a showroom manager how much a displayed workstation costs, they really wouldn't have any idea. But vendors mostly use showrooms to display product line capability and to create brand awareness. But it's not a good venue to discuss specific project requirements. Showroom tours can either be at the manufacturer's showroom or one of their local dealers carrying their product. Next slide, please. In preparation of your furniture RFQ package, the following documents will be necessary in order to obtain a desirable quote from vendors. Typical refers to a designed workstation to include private offices in other areas. Most typicals are workstations or private offices, and we will be assigned code numbers such as WS01 or PO01. We include typicals in our statements of works along with the information with electrical and data requirements. Typical development tends to consume much of the design hours. Designers can assist with the development of your statement of work and floor plan as well. A floor plan is not necessary in a pre-award RFQ package, however. It is CO's determination to decide if they want all the vendors to quote based off the floor plan or quote based off of typicals. To include before and after is very much a project specific and will depend on various factors. Developing a pricing or a bill of material worksheet is a useful tool in the RFQ evaluation. The typicals are assigned a product code, and this worksheet allows vendors to quote based off of these typical codes. The worksheet allows for an easier understanding of the quote, as each product code contains many components of a bill of material, while the BOM is much more detailed and the evaluation is much more onerous. Next slide, please. For most furniture procurements, the large majority of the spend usually comes from systems furniture. Systems furniture refers to panel-based systems that can be configured as cubicles, desks, benches, etc. Increasingly, it's been used for private offices, which tend to be less common as agencies move to open floor plans. Systems furniture can be configured in near countless number of ways, and it's important that your design specifications identify the type of configurations you are seeking. This will allow for a more accurate quote and less post-award administration, which will help the project stay on schedule. It is important to note that all the components work in concert with one another, so you can't mix and match manufacturer products in this way. Once production is commenced, changes are costly because the product cannot be repurposed and all the manufacturing is done in real time. Next slide, please. Case goods. So these products are typically found in private offices and offer a more traditional look. They tend to be more expensive than systems furniture, but the pricing varies significantly depending on the type of wood selected and the type of finishes selected as well. Laminate is an option as well for those looking to reduce cost. While a lot of agencies are getting away from private offices and moving toward an open floor plan, case goods are still a good option for some agencies. The lead time for case good manufacturing tends to be a little bit longer than systems furniture, so it's important to note that in your procurement process. However, just like systems furniture, changes are costly once production has commenced. Next slide, please. This chart is a handy reference our technical team helped me put together. While it may look like it, it's not an airing of their grievances that they've seen from good and not so good furniture procurement packages. The difference between manufacturers' product dimensions tend to be nominal, and vendors focus on overall footprint. Component dimensions will vary ever so slightly, but most of the time, they can meet the functional aspects of the requirement. You will want to allow for a small size product variance that will allow for a full and open competition. I've seen in the past requirements limit the vendor's pool, even though the customer wasn't married to their narrow specifications. It's just what they were told to use. If a product will work in a space and meets the overall requirements you need, it is beneficial to allow a vendor to quote the product. Developing your requirements is a balancing act. You want to design your specifications to meet your needs, but you also don't want to have them be too narrow where you will limit competition and perhaps spend more than you need. Next slide, please. Small businesses. So I know I've been talking about select few of large manufacturers, but there are a number of small manufacturers who can also satisfy your requirements. In addition, small dealers will quote directly and will offer the product of large manufacturers. The NMR comes into play when an ordering agency decides to set an opportunity aside. While awards to dealers count towards small business spend, these vendors would not be eligible for small business set-asides due to the NMR. I don't want to get into too much detail right now, but John Green at the end of the Q&A will be more than happy to answer any questions you have about the NMR. We sort of dubbed him our NMR expert. Next slide, please. Past performance during the RFQ process. So a past performance evaluation can be done in several ways for furniture procurement. IWAC regularly generates CPARS reports pertaining to furniture vendors for the furniture projects we award. This is a good resource for similar sized furniture projects you may do and will give you a good past performance evaluation for your project. These evaluations can be found in the Past Performance Information Retrieval System, or PPPs, or PPPs, depending how you want to pronounce it. It's an easy to navigate system, but you will need a complex password and a retina scan to get in. Well, maybe not, but sometimes it feels like that. If you want additional past performance, you may ask the vendors to provide your own past performance examples that are similar to the size and scope of your project to ensure they are capable of meeting your project requirements. While they will likely select customers they have a good business relationship with, you will still be able to see that they can complete projects similar to yours in size and scope in a successful way. Next slide, please. The request for quote. So the RFQ package will be broken down into several parts, with technical and pricing being the main sections. For technical, as mentioned earlier, floor plans can be provided in the RFQ for a more detailed quote, or they can be provided post-award to the awardee. This is at the CO's discretion and can be based on project specifics. In creating plain view and 3D drawings, due to the product differentiation, the vendor provides its unique version of typicals. Plan drawings are two-dimensional and can be overlaid onto the floor plan. The bill of materials, or BOM, is a very detailed document and contains all the components that make up a furniture typical. Here you see whether or not the vendor included all of the request parts and features. The BOM will also allow you to validate the pricing the vendors provide in a pricing spreadsheet. Delivery and installation. How a vendor details their delivery and installation plan will be an important part of your technical evaluation. The vendor will need to meet your project's specific requirements, and different aspects of your project may affect the vendor's schedule and installation cost. Oftentimes, a building particulars document will be included in the RFQ. It will contain the building point of contact information, information about service or freight elevators, loading dock information, HSPD 12 requirements for the installers, times of the day the product can be delivered, and other relevant information for delivery and install. All this information is necessary for a vendor to provide an accurate quote for the delivery and install. Next slide, please. Pricing worksheet. A pricing worksheet helps to aggregate the line item pricing to enable comparisons across competing vendors in a quick and efficient way. It is a simple and quick way to view a vendor's pricing for your furniture project and to make sure they are quoting on all the typicals you required. However, the line items in the BOM still must be examined to ensure proper discounts and completeness of the quote. Ultimately, the pricing in the pricing spreadsheet should correspond to the bill of materials. Next page, please. The basis of award. There are two types of basis of award options for you to choose from on your furniture award. best value, lowest price technically acceptable, or LPTA, or best value trade-offs. IWAC tends to award on LPTA basis because of our customers tend to require strict adherence to their design specifications. But if the vendor has some design leeway, or you are looking for a more creative solution, trade-offs could make sense for you. You may feel more comfortable paying a higher price if you are receiving a better solution. This will again be up to the CEO to determine which solution works best for you. Additionally, the CEO will have to justify the trade-offs for the higher price in their award documentation. If a truncated schedule is needed, the LPTA award allows for a quicker evaluation normally and a lot less stress on the awarding CEO. Whether you decide on LPTA or trade-off procurement, you're looking to make an award that satisfies your requirement and stays within budget. Simple, right? Next slide, please. So the technical evaluation of the quote. In layman's terms, the typical evaluation by the designer makes sure the vendor is quoting the products you asked for in the statement of work. You want to make sure you get what you asked for, and what you want to make sure you get what you asked for and not something else. However, this is easier than it sounds. This is a complex evaluation, as each vendor has product variation that requires the evaluator to understand the requirements and the variances in the RFQ, and whether or not the vendor's quote meets these requirements. It is at this evaluation stage that clarifications are often issued to the vendors, as it can sometimes be to determine whether or not some products meet the specifications or if additional information is necessary. Often, more than one round of clarifications may be required in order to receive a technically acceptable quote, so please plan accordingly. Next slide, please. Pricing. So the furniture industry is categorized by very intense competition. If the prices vary tremendously in a quote, this is a cause for concern. It may be a simple math error, or one vendor did not understand the requirements completely, or perhaps you erred in your requirement development. You want to make sure that you design your requirements so that all vendors are quoting on a level playing field. Additionally, ancillary services may also be required, such as post-award design, project management, and install. These services should not account for more than 20% of the product cost. During post-award, field measurements will lead to a revised bill of materials, which should in turn determine the final cost. The good news is, due to panel sharing, the final invoiced amount will almost always be lower than the quoted amount. If for some reason this isn't true for your procurement, don't quote me on it. Next slide, please. As noted earlier, the large manufacturers have a network of dealers nationwide. If an award is made to a manufacturer, a local dealer will handle most of the post-award functions and communications. This is an acceptable part of the process, but ultimately any changes, issues, clarifications must come from the manufacturer and the CO. The dealers will handle project meetings, finish selections, field measurements, and coordinate delivery and installation. IWAC will always inform the awardee that only the CO can issue a change to the order. Sometimes both customer and vendor project managers will seek to make changes and agree on them, but will forget to include the CO. Again, the CO is the one who makes the final determination and can change the order. Once the project is delivered and installed, the dealer will also handle the walkthrough and final punch list of the products. Next slide, please. So the client role, this is where you step in. So your role post-award is necessary to ensure a successful procurement. You'll need to finalize fabric and finish selections in a timely manner in order not to incur any schedule delays. The awardee will not begin the manufacturing of the products until the selections are finalized. You will need to coordinate delivery and install with the building managers and facilitate the vendor's installation team schedule. Oftentimes, there may be more than one installation team at the site at the same time. Once finished, the vendor will walk through the space and create a punch list. You will always want a representative at the time to make sure there are no issues when accepting the product. This is to ensure, and forgive me if I'm being too technical here, that no funny business occurs. Next slide, please. Post-award. The vendor will provide the final bill of materials for acceptance after the punch list is finalized. For reasons I could never figure out, the industry tends not to be in a hurry to invoice. Sometimes they will partially invoice for some of the product, or just delay overall in sending their invoices. Please inform your finance folks of this so they don't get on your back. Not that that's ever happened to me before. Lastly, remember the final price will be lower than the quoted price, as panel sharing factor tends to reduce the price by approximately 10%. Now, this doesn't mean you get to go out and spend all that extra money. These last minute type of changes tend to delay the overall schedule. Next slide, please. So just a quick overview of the entire schedule here. I'll go quickly, and we've touched on some of this already. There may have been sections you think I've glossed over, and you can just ask as many questions as you want. We have an expert team happy to help after I'm done. As far as getting your furniture project started, don't delay in starting your furniture procurement process. It will typically take about 9 months from when you start, and there'll be an additional delays for some products due to supply chain issues. Once you complete your RFQ package, you will want to give the vendors 4 weeks to quote. I have never in my experience had a vendor with the perfect quote, so you want to add a few more weeks for clarifications and at least one more round of quotes. Depending on the complexity and your own resources, your technical and price evaluation will take a few weeks as well. This also depends on how many rounds of quote there are. The post-award process will take another week or so, depending on how fast you can complete your finished selections, field measurements, and issue a notification to proceed the manufacturing of the product. You will need to now allow another 8 to 12 weeks for manufacturing of the products and another 2 to 4 weeks for delivery and install. From our center's furniture experience, these timelines remain fairly static from an industry perspective. You do, however, control how fast you complete the tasks you need for a successful procurement. So remember, when it comes to furniture procurement, don't delay and contact GSA. Next slide, please. So thank you very much for enduring my presentation. We will now begin the Q&A panel of today's webinar. I'd like to thank John Breen, Laura Taddy, Sean Kelly, and Annette Lang for joining us today. So panel, you can join on. And please type your questions into the chat, and we can get started. So John, we have a question about how to request a design service. Did you want to go over that aspect?
Sure, Jim. Can you hear me? Because I cannot see myself in the panel window, but okay.
You're there, looking
All
sharp.
right, great. Right. So I wanted to answer that question live for a very particular purpose. Like, our schedules certainly provide vendors who offer that service, and it can be done by awarding a task order to such vendors. But I wanted to point out, and this is particularly for agencies who are going to be in public building service space, they may be able to acquire that service through PBS. So a lot of times PBS will either provide it directly with in-house interior designers. Sometimes they'll build it into the lease whereby the lessor provides the service. So before spending additional money and placing a purchase order for design services, if you're in public building service space, please first make sure that it's not being provided that way to avoid just paying extra. And but as far as our vendors, yes, they can definitely do that. The point that I want to make, though, is, furniture procurement takes a long time by itself, as Jim just covered. So if you have to seek or obtain design services through a vendor, that's obviously going to be an additional procurement lead time that you'll have to build into your project schedule.
Thanks, John.
You're welcome.
And next question. Since the exact price will be based on the actual design and furniture provided, what contract type do you recommend, since 4.8.4 is limited to firm fixed price and time and materials?
We generally do firm fixed price. Now, I have to kind of caveat that, in that the initial price you award is unlikely to be the final price you pay after all invoices have been submitted and paid. Generally speaking, you will pay roughly 10% less than the award amount. And there's a couple reasons for that. One is, in order to validate their that their product will fit in the space, prior or soon after receiving the award, they're going to do field measurements, because they may have to adjust work surfaces or panel heights to accommodate windows and columns and things of that nature, which will tend to reduce the price slightly. The other item that tends to reduce price is panel sharing. So when they quote typicals, they assume that each typical stands by itself and has 3 unique walls. But in reality, when they put the workstation side by side, there will be some panel sharing, which will reduce the amount of product that's required and will therefore further reduce the ultimate price paid. So it's firm fixed price, but you will see adjustments to that price prior to closing out the order.
Thanks, John. We have a question about design, space design. Someone's just looking to get started on their space in an area that they own the building, but they need a space planner to come in. And so I think they're just asking, would that be part of the design services that can be provided on schedule?
It can be, but I just want to go back to an earlier point. So there's kind of 2 tiers of design, right? So there's the design that's ancillary to a furniture purchase. So if you place an order for furniture, I mentioned field measurements, right? So that's a design line item that'll be included on the order, and it'll just be basically the vendor coming in and validating any drawings that were provided to the vendor so that they can ensure that their product will fit. And that's generally ancillary. It's generally a low cost line item that's included on an order, along with installation and some ancillary project management services as well. If you're talking about developing a floor plan, a block plan, anything like that, architectural drawings or design intent type drawings, our vendors can provide that, but that would be a separate procurement that would precede the acquisition of the furniture itself. That is also a service that could potentially be acquired through PBS, Public Building Service, in space that is owned or leased by Public Building Service.
We have a question about the PBS regional BPAs already in place. I think just looking for more information on how they're used, who can use them, just general information about them, the different regions for PBS. So just to expand on the existing BPAs for the 1 through 4, 5, 9 and 10.
Sure.
Just looking for more information about that. So if you could just, talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So those are tools that we use in our assisted acquisition business line, whereby either FAS or PBS does the ordering. So the ordering is done by GSA, and the current geographic coverage is regions 9 and 10 on the west, which is essentially the West Coast, and then regions 1 through 4, which is essentially the East Coast, with the exception of National Capital Region. We do not have a BPA that covers that area. And that's largely intentionally because it represents such a large portion of the PBS portfolio. We wanted to kind of keep that wide open to competition, and therefore excluded it from those BPAs. But generally the way it works is if an agency is in PBS space and they're in any of those geographic areas, they could get assisted acquisition support either through PBS or through IWAC.
Okay. Thanks, John. Next question asks for an award and delivery date. If I put 90 days, does that mean the contract will be awarded to the company within 90 days? Or I think they're just wondering about the whole process. Is it when their install needs to begin, or that, typically I think we put our award and delivery date is when we actually want them to start moving in, and we want the furniture to be produced. So I think that's what they're asking. Is the delivery date, the actual date where you want to move in, or is that when you want the furniture to be delivered?
John, go ahead and take a shot at this one. So to answer that question, you're going to have your award after you go through your entire procurement process, and your award is going to be whenever you sign your award document, your Form 300, your 1449, whichever you use. And your delivery date, what we use is your delivery date when you expect the furniture delivery to start. Typically, once the award is made to when you finish up with your fabrics and finishes that John had mentioned earlier. That might take a month or so. And then we would request a final bill of materials to adjust for any changes that are made during the design process. So we would get a revised bill of materials from the vendor, and make a modification if any changes are required. And then from that point, when they put the order in production, you really need to account for at least 8 weeks, possibly 10 to 12, for that order to be produced. Our manufacturers produce based on the order. They don't have things sitting in a warehouse that they just go and pull it off the shelf. So they're going to custom make that order for you, and you need to give yourself at least, I would say, 10 to 12 weeks before that installation can start. So we use that delivery date as when the furniture is going to begin to be installed.
Thanks, Annette. And follow up from the same, the customer's looking to know if they need to do an RFI first before they do an RFQ, and just looking for a little bit more information about what's the difference between the two.
Sure, we typically do both, especially when we're putting together a BPA. We send out an RFI, request for information, really to find out which vendors out there in the industry might be interested in providing a quote to us. We usually will typically provide a draft statement of work so we can get comments back from the interested parties to see if there's something in that statement of work that just jumps out them for some reason, a requirement that might be tough to meet. And we kind of look for trends. Do a lot of the vendors say you're asking for X, and this is really a tough requirement for various reasons? And then we might reconsider and take that requirement out based on what we hear back from the industry. We use that RFI response, again, to adjust the statement of work as necessary. And then when we do the RFQ, we typically will send the RFQ directly to those vendors who responded to the RFI. That's not to say that somebody else can't come down and say, hey, I'd like that RFQ as well. Even though it didn't respond to the RFI, we'll certainly send it to them, so long as that initial quote period is still open. But we typically do the two-step process and use what we learn in the RFI then to move to the RFQ.
Thanks, Annette. We have a question about Unicore. The customer wants to know about going to Unicore. Will they have to get a certificate or some sort of letter from Unicore first before going to GSA for their furniture needs? John, Annette, Sean, anyone?
Yeah, I'll try to answer that one. I don't think the answer to that's super clean cut. You have to consider Unicore in your market analysis for sure, and determine whether or not their product is suitable for your need and adheres to commercial standards in terms of quality and price and so forth. So you definitely have to address them. Whether or not you have to get a certificate, I'm not sure about that. I mean, I know one practice that will ensure you're in compliance and in giving consideration to Unicore is you could go out to schedule vendors, 3 or 4 or however many responded to the RFI, and also include Unicore. And by giving them visibility to the RFQ, you are in compliance with the FAR. The likelihood of them actually quoting is it's hard for me to comment on. Our experience is that they're unlikely to quote, but it really determines, it's really going to be determined whether or not they think that opportunity is one that their products and services line up well with.
Thanks, John. We won't have any more questions coming in from anyone else. John's here to ask about NMR or any questions about the package office changes that Sean Kelly can answer. There is a question about a training to walk through the process of furniture procurement and how to submit. We do offer no-cost advising in IWAC. I don't know, John, if you want to touch on that for a customer looking for some guidance throughout the process of doing their own procurement.
Sure. So we do a couple of different things. We certainly buy furniture on behalf of other agencies, but a lot of times that's not suitable or doesn't make sense for an agency because the requirement might be small, or the acquisition shop may want to do it internally. And in those situations, we're happy to help in a number of different ways, whether it's giving general information about the industry and how it works, helping you create a project timeline, understanding production lead times. We can also give sample RFQs, statements of work, et cetera. So we can provide all that type of assistance if you reach out to us.
Thanks, John. And maybe we could touch on some of the assisted acquisition services that we offer. I know that you don't want to get in specifics, but we've done some obviously BPAs for different for PBS, but also for other agencies, but also some one-off buys for some of the folks who are have requirements for a furniture project, but may not have the in-house resources to perhaps do it themselves. So you could just touch on a little bit of that, expand on some of the stuff that we've done and some of the stuff that we could do for an agency looking for someone to do the acquisition for them.
Yeah, sure. I could expand on that a little bit. So a lot of the projects we do tend to be agency relocations. That's probably 80% of them. So an agency's moving from one end of the state to the other, or one end of a city block to another. We've done relocation projects. Typically they're $1 million or greater. That allows us to provide a lot of value added and recover our costs. So that's kind of the area where we target, but we offer solutions that are more custom. So we have a couple of agencies who have a lot of high volume of requirements across the country, and these agencies are very disciplined in terms of demand management. They've standardized their product offering and things of that nature. For agencies like that oftentimes offers us an opportunity to recover our costs. So we tend to put BPAs in place for them that we then order against continuously throughout the course of the year. So that's kind of our typical scenarios under our assisted acquisition program. And then I think Jim kind of touched on the FIT program, where that's a little bit different in that we're owning the furniture. GSA is owning the furniture and leasing it back to the agency along with the space. And that's actually there's an application and acceptance process that's administered by public building service in that case. So those are kind of our two primary assisted acquisition business lines, in addition to the NSN, which is more of a heavily focused on providing commodities through the requisition channel.
Thanks.
Sure.
We have another question about RWAs. Work requests or RWAs, are they needed if we want GSA to procure or design the furniture? So type of funding question of how, if they were to go through us for assisted acquisition, and what type of funding would be necessary?
I'll take that. So the agency, if they are funding it themselves, they would be submitting their own reimbursable work agreement directly to us, and there would be an interagency agreement part A and an interagency agreement part B to go along with that, if there's not already one established. And if they're part of the FIT program, then that would be a separate process. It wouldn't be a direct RWA. They would be in a leasing agreement that would be going through PPS, and that would be supplemental to their leasing agreement for the furniture.
And just to piggyback on that, in conjunction with something John had alluded to, when we do an assisted project for PBS, for a PBS customer, we can either be funded directly by PBS, or we can receive the funding from their customer agency. Either way, so it really depends on how they want to do it. We do see a lot of times the customer will give the money to PBS, and that includes construction and furniture and kind of everything wrapped up in their project, and then PBS will then in turn give FAS the money for the furniture piece of it. So we can do it either way, through PBS or coming directly from the customer agency.
Thank you. Next question is, do we provide or can we provide an on-site visit to make sure the current furniture will match the furniture being purchased? I think that speaks to the design, probably some showroom tours or field visits. But is that something that you would recommend either for us or for an agency to do for themselves before they move forward with their procurement?
So matching is a tricky thing because it may not be possible. You know, like if the existing product is a product line that's no longer manufactured or supported by industry, you may not actually be able to match it. And then it also depends on the particulars of the situation. Like if you're looking to connect additional product to existing product, you know, that's very different from we're furnishing the floor above us and we want it to look similar. So the facts of the situation, I think, are important. So it's kind of hard to answer that one generically. We need to understand a little bit more about the situation. I mean, generally speaking, if you're going to, if you have 4 workstations and you want to connect to it, you're in a limited sources situation because, you know, there's no standardization of parts and their connectivity. So if you have one, you know, vendor A's product for the 4 cubicles and you're adding 2, then you have to go back to that vendor. Not necessarily the same dealer, but you definitely need the product of that manufacturer. So the specifics of the matching scenario are pretty important for us to give a good answer.
Thanks, John.
Sure.
We have a question about waivers for the Air Force Furniture BPA. Does GSA work to help get the waivers to get around, or it says to go around the Air Force Furniture BPA, or does the customer have to get these prior to starting the process?
I think that's a question that they would have to ask the Air Force Program Office.
Yeah, from my experience, I think it's the customer getting a waiver, right, John? From their own.
Well, I mean, there's sort of a conflict of interest in us answering that question. I mean, I think it's best that we refer back to the Air Force Program Office.
Okay. There's a question about a sample price quote template. We can send that out with the documents, with the slides and the recording as well. We can get a sample out for anyone who's looking for a sample price quote. There's another question. It might be a similar answer to the previous one, is about a POC for the Air Force Program Office. I don't believe that's something that we have to give out, John. I'm not sure how you want to address that.
Well, I mean, I think we could. I mean, I don't know if we want to just say it live. I would check with Ivana on that. I mean, we certainly know folks there. I just don't. There's 2 names that come to mind, and I don't know which of the 2 is the most appropriate. So we could follow up with that.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. We'll follow up that.
Email us at furniture@gsa.gov with the request, and we'll check with our Air Force contacts and give you the right name.
Okay. Thanks, Ivana. Now, team, this is sort of a broad question to all of you about like sort of any horror stories or any things, you know, unforeseen things to plan for during a furniture procurement. Obviously, schedules being very important for the process, and sometimes things pop up. So anything that you might would be good to know, that for folks to anticipate that, you know, may not likely to happen, but certainly could in a furniture procurement that you should be mindful of to you know, so you can avoid any schedule delays or any issues that might pop up. I know it's hard. There's been a lot of different ones through the years, but if there's anything you could share, that'd be great.
I think you need to be wary, just if you're involving construction at all in your project, realize that construction really drives everything. And you might have the best intention of having furniture delivered at a certain point in time, but we've seen very many projects get delayed and delayed and delayed because of construction. So just be wary of that. And then also production lead times, because you don't actually realize how long it can take to produce the furniture. You know, that you're not just going to place an order and have it delivered in 2 weeks, that there is time involved. So really the timeline, I think, is a really big thing that, you know, is always subject to change and subject to being influenced by outside factors.
Do you want to include that with your anticipated delivery schedule? So it may not be that 90-day window. And also there's been supply chain constraints currently due to many different factors, but that all adds to your lead time as well.
And I know, and you guys could all touch on this. I know there's been some, you know, sometimes a customer will place an order and then there's delays, either construction or for other reasons, And we've asked vendors to hold their price in the past. I know that's been more difficult recently with inflation, and obviously, gas prices going up, so delivery charges can fluctuate. So I don't know if you want to just, highlight that, emphasize that, it can be more difficult for vendors to hold their quote for an extended period of time because of, gas and inflation and stuff like that going on, that perhaps in the past they would have been more willing to or able to, and now it's a bit more difficult. So something to anticipate as far as pricing goes. I don't know if anyone's experienced that or could, touch on that.
Yeah, I think you just, the point you made is very timely. So anytime you push the delivery date out, that's going to be a situation of, a mutual agreement scenario. So, the vendor has to agree, and they may ask for some kind of escalations. But I would say this is, particularly if you're using the multiple award schedule program, there's a layer of protection there, because if they have not received a price escalation at their schedule level, it's unlikely that they could pass it down to you at the order level unless they gave you a very strong discount, and they're just kind of giving you a smaller discount. But but there should be a cap that's established at the schedule level. So be wary of that. The other point I would make, and this really kind of like ties into what Laura and Annette said, is yes, the delivery dates can shift, sometimes due to the government, construction delays and so forth, sometimes due to the vendor production lead times. But the one thing that is important to keep in mind is you never want product to deliver early, because there's really no mechanism that the vendors have to store it that's not costly. So generally speaking, they might give you 30 days of free storage at a dealer's local warehouse. And we write something into our statements of work to more or less require that 30 days of storage at no cost. But generally speaking, you'd be looking at monthly storage fees if the product arrives too early, and it's arriving early because of a government caused delay. So not early in the truest sense, but before we're ready to have it installed.
Another question, and I touched on in my presentation about having multiple vendors, in a space, whether it's, table delivery, workstation delivery, seating. Any advice you could give for any future procurements on how to address that, handle that, navigate that in their RFQ or post-award process? So, there's not finger pointing on, oh, this person, put a hole in the wall. No, it was this person. It was the seating people. Oh, it was the table people. Oh, during that process.
One of the things that we've seen is that we've gotten asked before if we, IWAC, are going to provide, who's going to be the core on this project, who's going to, be there to make sure everything flows. And that's one thing that we don't do. So we're relying on the customer, the end user, to have that person, that point person on site to, meet the truck at the dock and make sure that they get their, access to the elevator or into the building or whatever it is. So I think if you're using our assisted services, it's important to know that that's something that we don't provide. So you really need somebody strong on site to coordinate all of that, especially if you've got construction involved and they're going to have multiple contractors and subcontractors going in and out, all vying for the same space on the freight elevator, or the same room in the hallway, or whatever the case might be. So you really need to have that strong point person there to be the traffic cop with all of that.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say that the risk is higher with a couple of things. One is if you're buying demountable walls, that coordination is a bigger issue because of the amount of space that the systems installers are going to take up compared to the amount of space that the installers of demountable walls are going to take up. They could bump into each other, and it's generally a better practice to have the walls going first. So with demountable walls, I think it's a particular concern. The other issue is the building particulars, as Annette would mention. Like if generally this isn't a huge problem and something to worry too much about, but if you don't have freight elevators, if there's a strict process for requesting access to a commuter elevator where you have to pad it, in order to protect the walls and so forth, that's where it becomes an issue. Or if there's limited loading docks, In those scenarios, you're going to have a competition for those types of resources. So I think it's not something to worry too much about, but where you have those constraints, it becomes a bigger issue.
John, a few more questions. Is there a general price point when we're procuring turnkey furniture, purchase and installation through GSA is recommended? I know it might be a little difficult to answer, but you know, because all the products are discounted off the schedule and then competed typically, but they're just looking for, I guess, a specific, you know, pricing discount that you would think would be acceptable, or is it more just competition breeds that sort of fair and reasonable determination?
Not entirely sure I understand the question.
Yeah,
is
I'm
that
looking at Jason's question and Stacy's, John. I think they're related. I think they're talking about the purchase dollar threshold where we would accept a turnkey assisted acquisition.
Yes, I mean, I can answer Stacy's question more easily because there's something in the works to address that scenario. So we've partnered with Public Building Service. We're putting a BPA in place for small projects whereby PBS is going to engage in more furniture buying, and the threshold that we're using to identify small projects is $1 million, which seems intuitively kind of large, but that's the threshold where IWAC has found it economical for us to buy on behalf of other agencies. And we recognize that leaves a lot of agencies in a situation where they can't get service. So we've kind of partnered with Public Building Service to address those smaller projects. So that BPA is in pre-award phase now. And once that's awarded, that'll be a vehicle that Public Building Service has locally in order to buy furniture on behalf of agencies that are going to be sitting in their space particularly.
And then I think Jason had a follow-up on the, you know, you'd mentioned over $1 million for our own specific assisted acquisition, you know, services. But just from my experience, you know, that's a lot of those are case by case, right? As far as whether we can handle an assisted acquisition for a number of reasons, right?
Yeah, I think we generally look at it at three things. So we look at the value of the procurement, because that speaks to our ability to recover our costs. Because a lot of times a small project can take the same amount of effort and time as a large project. So the value of the procurement matters. The other thing that matters is the schedule. We have to make sure that we can honor the schedule that the customer is seeking in terms of the installation date, you know, primarily. And then the third thing is the funding in question has to be funding that we can utilize, meaning it's not expired, it's the appropriate fiscal year, those types of considerations.
Okay. Thank you, John. There are no more questions, so that, you know, if anyone wants to furiously type something real quick before we say thank you to our panel, we can get to that. But I appreciate everyone for joining the Q&A. As mentioned, the slides we had a little technical difficulty with the slides being uploaded to Zoom, but we will get them out to everyone as long as in addition to a recording of this and the price quote sample that we mentioned for people to use for themselves. Any future questions you might have, you can email myself or furniture@gsa.gov. We can help you with assisted acquisition or you know, no cost advising, as we mentioned, or any general questions you might have. We have an experienced team who've handled many different furniture procurements and be happy to assist in any way they can.